Hello, welcome to the Self-Learning Podcast by Dr. Sushma Singh. Let us start discussion on Unit 25, Field Research. And our topic is Feminist and Post-Modernist Perspectives on Interviewing. We are here adding two different perspectives on interviewing for your use as and when you may find either or both useful for your mini research project. The first one is a feminist perspective on interviewing. Feminist methodology rejects the assumption that maintaining a strict separation between the researcher and the researched produces a more valid objective account. One way in which feminists avoid treating their subject as mere objects of knowledge is to allow the respondent to talk back to the investigation. It aims at building more from the sharing between the researcher and his respondents. In order to do this, the researchers need to interview in ways that allow the exploration of incompletely articulated aspect of women's experience. An Oakley feminist paradigm for interviewing seeks to minimize objectification of the subject as data by viewing the interview as an interactional exchange. In her framework, answering the questions of the interviewee personalizes and humanizes the researcher and places the interaction on a more equal footing. The meaning of the interview to both the interviewer and the interviewee and the quality of interaction between the two participants are all silent feature issues when a feminist interviews women. Oakley also points out that the interactive interviewing is an approach that documents women's own accounts of their experiences and allows the sociologist to garner knowledge not simply for the sake of knowledge but for the women who are providing information. Traditionally, qualitative researchers have conducted interviews that are open-ended and intensive, seeking to avoid structuring the interaction in terms of researchers' perspective, but eliciting useful accounts is much more than encouraging women to talk. Most members of a society learn to interpret their experience in terms of the dominant language and meaning, and women have trouble talking about their experiences. What researchers can do is to take responsibility for recognizing how the concepts we have learned as sociologists may distort women's account. We can return to the activities conducted in specific settings as the source of our studies and ground our interviewing in accounts of everyday activity, in accounts of how particular women actually spend their time at home, for example, rather than a previously defined concept of a housework. Since words available do not fit, women learn to translate when they talk about their experiences. As they do so, parts of their lives disappear because they are not included in the language of the account. In order to recover these parts of women's lives, researchers must develop methods for listening around and beyond words. Now let us move to the next point, the post-modernist perspective on interviews. Post-modernist interview involves the sharing of personal and social experience of both respondents and researchers who tell their story in the context of a developing relationship. In this process, the distinction between the researcher and the subject gets blurred. We also view researchers' disclosures as more than tactics to encourage respondents to open up. The feelings, insights, and stories that researchers bring to the interactive encounter are as important as are those of respondents. Thus, our work focuses on the interview process, the stories and feelings that both respondents and researchers share in the interview, and the understanding that emerges during interaction. Interactive interviewing requires considerable time, multiple interview sessions, and attention to communication and emotions. It also may involve participating in shared activities outside the formal interview situation. Our approach is flexible and continually guided by the ongoing interaction within the interview context. Participants engaged in this kind of research must be open to vulnerability and emotional investment while working through the intricacies of sensitive issues. Interactive interviewing reflects the way relationships develop in real life, as conversations where one person's disclosures and self-probing invite another's disclosures and self-probing, where an increasingly intimate and trusting context makes it possible to reveal more of ourselves and to probe deeper into another's feelings and thoughts. We are listening to and asking questions about another's plight led to a greater understanding of one's own, and where the examination and comparison of experiences offer new insights into both lives. This intersubjective process provides a contextual basis for a level of understanding and interpretation that is not present in traditional hierarchical interview situations, where interviewers reveal little about themselves, aloofly ask questions in one or two brief sessions, and have little or no relationship with respondents. Feminists have called the researchers to acknowledge their interests and sympathies. They have also questioned the separation of the researchers and the respondent and viewed research as properly ascribed to the goals of empowerment, consciousness raising, and improvement of life circumstances. Moving away from a traditional research model, interpretivists encourage self-disclosures on the part of researchers. Researcher involvement both helps respondents feel more comfortable sharing information and closes the hierarchical gap between the researchers and respondents that traditional research encourages. Interviewees become narrators who improvise stories in response to researchers' questions, probes, and stories. Now let us wind up the session and take rest. Thank you very much for engaging yourself with the Self-Learning podcast.